Hey, welcome back everyone. Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. So in today's video, I'm just going to give you a time lapse of this, but before we get started, I wanted to explain the materials in case you're wondering. So this is on Strathmore 300 series. It's a 70-pound paper, so it's got a good weight to it. You could definitely ink on something like this, but I like that it's got a relatively smooth finish. So a little bit less tooth, a little bit less of a vellum, a little bit more of the smooth finish. And so on this, I basically just used 2H lead and a lead holder, 2mm lead holder. And I know it's redundant for a lot of people that watch the channel, but I have to assume that maybe you're here as a newbie, a noob. So basically a rotary sharpener. Now I will tell you a trick on these is that, well, I don't know if it's a trick, but basically you're going to buy some, they're going to work great. You're going to buy others and not so great. So stick with the ones that you find that work great. And I've even bought the same brand and one works well, the other one doesn't, and I pitch it. So expect to buy a couple of those, but when you get a good one, it's noticeably easier to do a quick sharpen. Quick sharpens will give you your darker lines, so keep that in mind because I constantly was battling as I was getting used to this again, getting my darker lines with a 2H lead. Paper will affect that as well, but a fresh sharpen will always give you a little bit, crisp, darker line, obviously. Regular erasers, just I like these little clickable ones. They're fast, easy to refill, stuff like that. And that's really it. So with this one, I wanted to take the time to time lapse this and then talk about the things that, I was thinking about while doing it, and then also things that I wish I would have did differently now that I'm looking at this piece all finished. So let's go ahead and progress through this. We'll talk a little bit about that and hopefully you gain something from it. Okay, so first things first, I lay in a basic shape to kind of confine the idea a little bit more. I think this helps because when you're drawing on a big or sheet of canvas, blank white paper or whatever, it's easy to kind of just push things out to the edge a little too much. So I'm going to experiment with using more shapes inside of shapes to kind of rein that in. So thinking a little bit more about even the composition before I start filling in the pose. So the pose, I had already sketched a couple really tiny thumbnails of just a leaned over kind of effect that I want to see. I was thinking at first that I wanted him stepping up onto a ledge and showing the other foot. You'll see, or you've already seen the end result that I end up doing away with that. I think that potentially that was a bad idea, but I was having problems with the leg, and then I started looking at reference, and I noticed that almost nobody draws feet. And then I remembered a video by Jim Lee where he said that that's not really people trying to get out of drawing feet. Sometimes it is, and definitely I felt like I was taking the easy out here. But he said that basically, if you pay attention to cinema and movies, they do that intentionally. They very rarely show the lower portions of the character, especially their ankles and feet, because of what it does for the shot. It frames it differently. It gives you a better dynamic feel. So regardless, it's not always just trying to get out of drawing feet, but I feel like the way I implemented it didn't work well enough. So there is that. And legs coming forward are always a tricky thing for me to get right. So again, that's something I have to practice more of. So after getting the pose in, I lay in some anatomy and I render the anatomy a little bit more. And, all I could say there is a lot of times people ask me like, how to improve it at the anatomy stage and stuff like that. It's just an ongoing battle, and you have to do pieces of. I like to do piece studies. I like to draw arms in different poses, legs in different poses, but then you got to make time to do figure drawing and pull it all together. So it's just a lot of hard work that goes into it, and it's a never-ending battle. And for the face here, you can see I used cross sections of lines, and I really like that effect. I've been doing that more and more, and I find that I don't have to redraw my face nearly as much. Not my face, obviously, but the face I'm drawing on the page. I don't have to draw it nearly as much because it basically gives me those guides that I need for symmetry and even asymmetrical. I feel like something is better about drawing those little grids. So definitely try that, see if it works for you. So the armor, you see I'm kind of going back and forth because I'm trying to picture the perspective that the armor would actually be in at this angle. I did want the feeling that he was leaned over more, and I feel like I didn't capture that enough. But it's there. It's just I really wanted. It's weird in my mind. I saw him just very hunched over and that very aggressive. I'm getting ready to come at you kind of pose, and it came through a little bit, but not enough. And then with the hand, I think I redrew that twice. Oh yeah, so I erase right there. I start looking at my own hand. And I know I say this all the time, but I'll say it again. Put a mirror by your art table and get used to looking at your own body for reference. Facial expressions and hands are really essential, really quick, but then redraw it in a simplified, stylized manner. And once you get used to that, it really makes the process a lot easier for you. All this is just, texturing at this point. Now, one thing I do want to make sure to mention that I felt was really important to getting this one done. I definitely went into this knowing that I was going to draw this character. I set up a few reference shots of God of War 4, and because there's a very distinct different look of this character, obviously from like part 3 to part 4. So made sure to do that, and I basically had those poses pre-worked out. Like I said, those you'll see. I kind of bring them in because I use the paper to protect my hand from smudging, which I probably should have did earlier in this. But that's kind of the beauty of the 2H lead, that you don't have to worry too much about that. But it is good to do. Then I don't want to block the artwork from you guys, so that's the other part of it. Now, I also feel like I should have made the axe way bigger. So that was, in hindsight, that was another problem with this piece. So the arm's back, right? And I wanted him to be holding the arm back, but the axe could have had a little bit better perspective on it for sure. It could have been larger. And also the upper arm, the bicep area, probably should be longer in comparison to the forearm area. So that is a rookie mistake. That's just something I don't know. I was drawing it. It seemed fine. It looked fine to me. But then in retrospect, after watching the video and seeing it again, I'm like, and after posting it, I'm like, no, that's not right. If I really wanted that feeling of foreshortening, the upper arm, say the midway point is the elbow, that's going to be longer than the forearm. So, and then the way the wrist attaches to the hand, I could have really pushed that further. You can hide that hand behind the forearm, behind the wrist. That's the thing about foreshortening, is a lot of it's done with the overlaps, and you got to get the overlaps right. So I feel like that was another thing that I should have did better there. Now, the other thing is the overall proportions. And I shared this work and somebody had called me out on it. And I had already seen it. I was already kind of seeing it. But I'm like, it looks good. I like it. It's all right. I shouldn't say that. I like that. I think it's a good piece. But I knew something was wrong with it. And then sure enough, as soon as a couple people saw it and they were like, looks cool, love the rendering. They said nice things. And then they were like, but the proportions just something. They said it more like he doesn't feel as imposing as Kratos would. And then as I looked at more of the reference, it just kind of hit me like a light bulb moment. Like, yeah, the proportions are off. He looks smaller in stature because of it. I tried to fix it a little bit by reducing the head size, but it wasn't enough. It's almost like, well, his upper body should be bigger and a bit wider and overall, I think. And then also, I think his head in proportion should be a bit smaller. It's funny. I feel like I almost combined him with the main antagonist of the game. I can't remember that dude's name, but the bad guy that can't die, that keeps coming back after him. He has almost his proportions with Kratos' features. So again, just a mistake, something that happens. I should have spotted it more inside the illustration, inside the process. Now here's the weird thing. I feel like if you go back to the beginning and you look at the proportions of the initial pose, I feel like it was captured there, that it was more his scale and proportions. But as I rendered it, I somehow chiseled into it and made it too I just changed the proportions, and he looks more like a little guy that's kind of bulky, almost a little bit more dwarven. So again, that's one of the mistakes there. And I want to make sure that you guys realize that this part of the process of reanalyzing your work is so important, and then sharing it and taking constructive criticism. Like, for instance, one of the things I thought people would critique on this one, and again, you guys can comment down below, critique it. I don't mind. It's all about growth. It's all about getting better at this stuff. So critiques are definitely part of that game. And I know I didn't get everything right. But one of the things I thought people would critique, for one, I felt like I was cheating a little bit by hiding that foot. And really, I just feel like instead of that rock up in front of his foot, maybe it could have been like a broken, decayed tree or something. Maybe it would have done two things. I could have raised it up because it looks like the way it's lowered by the ankle, that the foot wouldn't have any room to rest behind it. At least that's the way I see it. So I would raise it up, and then by introducing a different texture and a different prop, in a sense, it would look more interesting and fun. So, and also the background, I just kind of threw something quick and easy in there. I feel like that was a little bit, I should have spent a little bit more time on that. Overall, this piece took about 2.5 hours, so I was trying to be aware of the time, but also it's got to be just a good end result, or the time should be somewhat secondary to the quality. And for the rock formations in the back, I feel like I put them too low for the perspective. So I gave this impression that he's like, well, besides the proportions making him look a little bit dwarven, he looks like a giant walking through the land or whatever. So I feel like that's something where I could have raised those mountains up a little bit more. But again, overall, I still like the piece. It's not like I'm, sitting here like, oh, I want to just crumble this thing up or anything like that. It's more or less, how do I grow? How do I look at it objectively? And then how do I take the critique that I got from people? I'll oftentimes share things on my Instagram, and I gotta admit, people on my Instagram are generally just, uh, high fives and all motivational and supportive, and that's great, and I love that. I thank everybody that follows me on there for that. But then when I share it on like howtodrawcomics.net, it's more of a site for people to critique, and they will do that more for you. So just keep that in mind. I think it's a really good site for you to share your work on, and really open the doors for that constructive criticism so that you can grow. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. More on the way very soon. As always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and bye for now.